Bob Chapek has been fired from Disney after losing a war I'm not even sure he knew he was fighting, against people he definitely didn't understand. That's how Bob Iger got to return as CEO of Disney after leaving it multiple years ago. He's only going to be a temporary person for 2 years, and so it doesn't seem like he wanted to come back at all. It was only this June when Bob Chapek's contract actually got renewed for 3 years. This wasn't planned, and Chapek was dismissed in the most insulting, disrespectful way possible. They'd actually gone behind his back and spoken to Iger before on the weekend, and Chapek was apparently only told about the decision minutes before the announcement went out to the public. You don't do all of that because of an earnings call. The company definitely would have known those figures before the earnings call went out, and this was an expected loss. Chapek had even spoken about the losses in interviews before the announcement itself. Everybody saw this coming. Now, I think for the real reason of why he got fired, you've got to dig a little deeper. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I covered one of Chapek's interviews about the past and the future, and said that he looked like a hostage within his own company, and I thought he made a major mistake. Because despite the programming which Disney has been putting out, which definitely biases one way or another, Chapek has repeatedly tried to make out that the company doesn't have any kind of stance or ideology. He said at one point when asked about Gina Carano that he doesn't see the company as leaning either way, and said that when people come to a Disney park, they don't walk in with their views on their sleeves. He struck me as a guy who was incredibly naive about what he was facing. He inherited a company full of people which had come in under Iger's reign, and I don't think he knew anything about the direction that they wanted to take the company. That's why when everything kicked off in Florida, he looked like a hostage victim.
By now, I hope you've all read my most recent note. I understand that we've made mistakes and the pain that those mistakes have caused. Every time an individual or institution that should have stood up for this community did not. I and the leadership team are determined to use this moment as a catalyst for more meaningful and lasting change.
Because despite the fact that I can't understand why a cartoon company needs to have a stance on any law in the country at all, apparently Disney must do. That's why when Disney didn't have a response to a Florida bill, suddenly the world was ending. All of the staff started walking out, and he had to make the classic "I'm so sorry" apology video, which at this point is just a stereotype for people that have put their foot in it and are desperately trying to keep their positions. Even Iger came out and threw him under the bus, saying it was simply a matter of right and wrong. Although I don't think that Iger realizes that the right thing for Disney to do would have been to shut your mouth. This is where I think Chapek laid the foundations for his final demise, especially when he talks about it in the interview. The interviewer was determined to pin Chapek down on the company's future profile in this regard.
You know, what's the line for Disney in a changing world? You know, your people love to get out there and say Disney's too woke, Disney's become too politically correct. You know, are they right? Do they have a point? We're a few months out from the controversy in Florida. What do you think you did right, and what do you think you did wrong? What are the lessons you've drawn from that?
And he made a massive mistake when he answered that the future, the most important thing about the company, was its staff. Their opinions were what mattered, and no matter what they said, that's what he should do.
I think the lesson is the lesson that we probably always knew, which is at Disney, it's all about the cast. If you think about the nature of why people have great Disney memories, what they remember more than anything is guest-cast interactions. So if that's the key to a great guest experience, then you have to make sure that the cast is at the center of everything that you do.
This meant you had the CEO of the company saying that I make the wrong decisions and the staff correct me. The moment he said that, he said he was no longer needed in the company, because if the staff are making all of the decisions, what's the point of you?
Reading between the lines, you misjudged how the employees would react with your initial out of the gate, and you had to get that right because that was a challenge for you, their reaction to your original stance of not speaking out.
Well, what I would say is that we were reminded through the passion of our cast reaction how important their sentiments are on these issues.
It's no surprise at this point that all through society and language, we have various different landmines that have been carefully placed and are constantly changing depending on the day about what you are and aren't allowed to say at any one time. Because there's so many and they're constantly changing, it's almost inevitable that at some point everyone will step on them, and then the mob gets to decide whether it goes off. And at this point, Chapek laid his own landmine. Because once you've decided that what the staff wants they get, and their opinions are always correct, Even when they go against my own, you don't have a leg to stand on anymore. And that is how you can end up with an internal revolt. Once he has admitted publicly that the staff are always right, even when they go against him, how on earth is he meant to defend himself against a revolt? He's already said that they are more important to the company than he is, and so when they say you need to go, how is anyone supposed to defend you? This is why I think Chapek is incredibly naive. I think he's a businessman. I think he's interested in the bottom line and making money. I don't think he knows anything about social issues at all, which normally wouldn't be a problem unless you've spent the last years filling your company with people that are. He spoke in that same interview about how he sees his role as the CEO, that he thinks actually he should be negotiating between the two sides, that the investors want one thing, making money, but the people within the company want something else, their own ideology, and he thought it was his job to stand in the middle and negotiate between the two.
People have such a deep founded relationship with Disney. Frankly, they don't even look at it as a company. They look at it as something that's part of their lives.
Yeah, part of their identity.
Yeah,
really,
part of their
ways.
identity.
Yeah.
When we do things that normal companies might do, sometimes it creates a friction, but of course we have shareholders that have different expectations. So one of the pleasures of my job is trying to balance all the different constituencies.
He has no idea what one side is like. He saw the world as any normal, rational person would. He assumed it was full of normal, rational people, and these people would negotiate. Except that's not the situation that we're in now. You can't negotiate with activists. It's their way or the highway. You have 100% of their views and agree with them on absolutely everything, even the things that contradict the other things and will change next week, or you must be immediately cast out and will replace you with someone that will. Chapek thought he was surrounded by other business people that actually cared about the company and it making money. And he didn't realize you can only do that if you've been hiring people who think that profit is good. People that think that profit is evil are generally just after themselves. They're jealous that somebody else can do something that they can't, that they've got something that they can't. Despite the fact that he resisted at first, he did eventually capitulate and give them everything they wanted. So at least I thought he would be useful. I didn't think he'd be getting fired. I thought he would remain their little hostage victim, the puppet CEO that would just do whatever he was told. What I didn't see him doing, though, after saying just how amazing all of the staff were and how he desperately needed all of them, was to start firing them, despite the fact that that would probably solve his issue if he'd actually managed to carry it out. What do you do when you take over a company which is just infested by people who will inevitably cost you money? Well, you get rid of them. It came as part of the profitability push for the flagship streaming service and wider industry turbulence, but it does leave a great opportunity to get rid of all the people which are a drain on your company, that don't contribute anything and just whine all the time. These are the same people which walked out of your company the moment you tried to do something that would have been good for the bottom line. But this issue was, this is something he should have done earlier, before he capitulated to the staff in the first place. Because otherwise, obviously, if you want to fire a load of your staff, then they're gonna try and get you fired first, so that they can keep their jobs. This is just common sense. Except now he's in a situation where he's already said that they matter more than he does. So who are the board supposed to protect? Because the one thing I don't think this is about is the earnings call. Chapek had spoken numerous times about how content was created, and during the couple of years where no one could basically do anything, obviously no one was making TV shows. But then afterwards things started moving into production, and this very quarter is when they hit the streaming service. So of course in the previous quarters the streaming service is going to lose a lot of money, because they're paying for these new shows which are about to hit. The cost is up front, and then the profit comes afterwards. Assuming they're good. Now, with National Treasure and Willow coming in the near future, I don't think they're going to be good, but the economic point still stands. Chapek even said in an interview that now it's like the floodgates have opened and all the content is swarming us. The good news is we got lots of great content and it's building subs. The bad news is that that cost had been greenlit years ago, finally came through the gate, and it's hitting it all at once. We're hoping that that gets normalized very, very quickly, and has predicted profitability in streaming by the end of 2024. This article was written on November 9th, and my video was made before that where he said essentially the same thing. Everyone expected the earnings call to report that the streaming service had lost money, so it doesn't make sense for that to be any reason for you to have emergency meetings and fire the CEO. Although it is a handy excuse. And of course any situation like this, it's never one reason. There's always multiple things that eventually lead to a conclusion. Whether that be Iger looking over his shoulder and making Chapek feel like he just wasn't actually in charge, or the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit, which definitely led to some bad PR. There's one thing you can't do as the CEO of a company, and that's lead it when you want something different to your workers. and you let them get their own way. We've seen it recently with Twitter, that a company becomes bloated as it gets larger. You employ a load of people who are there so that they can push an agenda rather than make money. And those people don't generally do any work. And as She-Hulk proved, you kinda don't want them to, because the work they do create will inevitably be infested by their ideas, which is antithetical to any customer actually watching it. There's only really two solutions to an employee rebellion. You go, this is how we're doing things, if you don't like it, leave, or you just tell him to leave. But instead, Chapek capitulated. He left the cuts too long, and he'd already empowered the staff that will inevitably have stabbed him in the back. And I think it raises an interesting question as to, can a CEO even stay out of this anymore? Because Chapek didn't want to pick a side, he wanted to stay neutral and just have a company that focused on cartoons, animations, and films and movies and entertainment. But he didn't realize that that meant he'd already picked a side, because only one side will allow it. As far as the people that'd been recruiting in California for years, not making a decision was already making one. If silence is violence, then how else are you supposed to take it? In answer to the question, I do think you can have neutral companies. That's what I want. I want companies to care about money and profit and nothing else. My toothpaste shouldn't have an opinion, and nor should my razors. Companies don't have opinions. It's their employees that do. But employees should remain a professional in a business and not bring their personal lives to work. It's that distinction which has been lost in the present day, and it's that distinction which needs to come back. A company can be neutral, but its CEO needs to understand the battle they're fighting, and Chapek didn't. I think a CEO can be neutral, but he can't be ignorant, and that's what Chapek was, and it cost him his job. Any company that wants to remain neutral must police their employees to have their employees think the same. That our personal opinions are not the professional opinions of the business itself. You leave that at home, or you stay at home. I think Chapek was a guy who cared about the bottom line, a businessman out of his time. One from not that long ago, but one which isn't really suited to the climate at the moment, especially taking over a company like Disney, which has the employees that Disney has had. And that means that if Chapek is out and Iger is back, the guy that made Disney the biased company it is today, with the hires, which are the ones that forced Chapek out in the first place, and then Disney is going to remain exactly the company he made it. Can Bob Iger pick up where he left off? Don't think there's any other choice. It was under his reign that all the employees that cared more about pushing a message than entertaining the customers got hired in the first place. That things like She-Hulk got greenlit in the first place. And so I can only leave it on one message. Come on, Iger. Give She-Hulk a season 2.
I'm sad and lonely.
Well, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe, more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.